All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Advocate LSU Sports Update. I'm Wilson Alexander, LSU football writer, joined today by Scott Rabalais, our esteemed columnist. It is his birthday week. Rab, how you doing on this birthday week? Probably must be feeling pretty good with that coming up.
What's that, Sonny? I didn't quite catch that. I'm getting a little old. No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's once you get past a certain number, it's just another day, for the most part. But we'll try to enjoy ourselves.
Absolutely. We get to spend part of it in Epcot and then watching an LSU football game against Florida. So let's get into that game a little bit. Obviously, LSU is at the halfway point of the season. And Rabin and Leah and myself did a roundtable this morning kind of evaluating a lot of this, which is up at theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. So go and check that out. We're going to kind of be extending that discussion today, talking broadly about LSU at the halfway point, and then get into later a little bit about this Florida matchup. And what to expect and some news and notes about that. But I want to start here, Brad. Obviously, LSU is 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC. But there's certainly some angst, especially when the most recent result that we have to analyze is a 40-13 loss at home to Tennessee. Is this team exceeding, meeting, or falling short of your expectations through 6 games?
I thought after 5 games they had a chance to be 5-0, and they did. Or could well be 4-1, and they were. And I wasn't sure how good Tennessee would be. Obviously, they're probably better than I expected. But I think they're about where I thought they would be overall. They've got some deficiencies. They've got some good players that show flashes of being, a quality team that LSU wants to be, but they're not quite at that level yet. And it's just not. I mean, it's just not anyone who thought, hey, really, they could go 11-1 or something like this year. No, they can't, and they won't now because they've got 2 losses. But it's not surprising to me at all where they are. That they've shown some weaknesses and some positives, some things to build on the future, and some things to work on now, and some things that just can't change because, as I heard someone say recently, you can't trade for an offensive lineman with Georgia. You can't give up a draft pick, to get a player from Iowa or something like that. You got to do that in the transfer portal in the offseason. But right now, you have the players that you have. And Brian Kelly has said that without saying, I've got a limited team. He said, these are the players we have, and I think he said a lot by saying that. So, yeah, I think they're about where I thought they'd be, fighting to have a winning season and go to a bowl and try to be better than last year, show some improvement. And, I think that they're going to win some games down the stretch, and they're going to lose some games. Then maybe go, why did they lose that? And this is one of those games that's a toss-up.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Like you said, I think it's easy to forget, but so important to remember that LSU was a team with less than 40 scholarship players in January and got demolished by Kansas State in a bowl game. And this was a culture rebuild, a personnel rebuild. There's so much that has changed about this team. And it takes time for that to mesh and come together. And that's maybe sometimes a little bit overlooked just because people want – and it's at the same time completely fair to criticize and expect more than what we're seeing because it's been so messy and kind of especially on special teams and just some coaching things that you think, okay, maybe they're not getting the best out of the players that they have. But, yeah, at the same time, like this team is not personnel-wise and roster-wise – at the level of an Alabama or a Georgia or even now a Tennessee. I do think they're very similar, though, to Florida, so it's going to be an interesting game this weekend. And let's dig into some of those strengths and weaknesses. What have they done? You kind of touched on it, but like what have they done well? And then we'll get into what they haven't done and what they need to improve. Let's start with just what you think they've done well, what you maybe been pleasantly surprised by through 6 games.
I think the defensive line has been good overall. I know they give up 260-something yards rushing to Tennessee, but I think overall, having lost Mason Smith so early in the season, in the first half of the Florida State game, I think they've done pretty well to weather that and to continue to be a strength of the team. That's an area where they're better than Florida. Is up front. Mickey Wingo has done a good job. The transfer from Missouri. Coming in there and filling in. He's not Mason Smith, but he's done a very capable job. And you have Guillory, and you have Gay, and you have Ojulari, and all those guys. They've done a pretty good job. I think they throw the tight ends a lot. I think the tight ends have been pretty good. It's a young group, but but Taylor has been good, and that's been a plus. And I think the running backs are doing as well as they can. And obviously, Armani Goodwin is now hurt, but Williams and Kane and Emery, Emery's shown flashes as he has throughout his career, but he had that great touchdown run against Auburn, for the winning touchdown. It was Fournette-esque, really, and they don't have a Fournette, they don't have an Edwards-Helaire, they don't have a Darius Geis this year, but they have, some players who are giving their all. And I think of a guy like Josh Williams is kind of the epitome of this team. He doesn't do anything great, but he's a good adaptable player who can run and block and catch, and is giving them their best. And I think that's all you can ask of these guys in 2022 is just to give your best. And I think those are the areas that stand out to me.
I'm glad you mentioned Josh Williams and Mekhi Wingo, because those are two players that have certainly played better than I think anyone would have expected coming into the year. Mekhi, he was an all-SEC freshman last year at Missouri, but like you said, to come in, he talked to us recently even about needing to improve his run defense when he got here, and that was kind of the main focus for him. For him to be able to step in admirably for Mason Smith, I think it was just last week, Ryan Kelly was asked about the interior defensive line, and he said Mekhi's been their most consistent player. And then even Jacqueline Roy, who had been kind of a little bit banged up, but he finally played really well against Auburn, but they needed to see more of that from him. And just in terms of consistency, it had been Mekhi Wingo. And then, like you said, Josh is obviously the running backs did not have a good game against Tennessee. there was no push up front anyway. But Josh has been doing some good things. And also, I think, like you kind of mentioned, also we think about like this season so much about building toward the future. The offensive tackles, the play of Will Campbell and Emory Jones, that's been a pleasant surprise because those are two guys who, okay, you have those two. You've got Garrett Dellinger for at least another season. Those are some like three people on the offensive line who you can really build around and start to actually construct a group up front that is able to maybe push off the line of scrimmage and be that dominant offensive line. Because that's what, when we start now to kind of shift into what else needs to improve or what maybe hasn't gone so well, is this offense wants to be a dominant run game and be able to build up kind of off of, winning at the line of scrimmage. And that has not happened. And so I think that is sort of spiraling into a lot of different issues, but it also shows me that as a coaching staff, they probably need to get more creative and get these wide receivers more involved because, they just don't have the personnel up front right now to sort of be what they want to be offensively. Other than that, what sort of areas, I think the obvious one is special teams, but what sort of areas are you seeing on the field that it's like that even despite the personnel and everything that we've said should be maybe more cleaned up and a little bit better right now?
Yeah, special teams obviously is the most glaring one, and not everything about the special teams. Jay Bramblet, the transfer from Notre Dame, has punted very well. He's number 2 in the SEC in punt average, but LSU is way down the list in terms of net punting because they've given up some big returns. Ramos has been a adequate kicker. He's kicked off out of bounds and he's missed a couple of kicks, but he wasn't going to be Cade York, and he hasn't been. But he's been adequate. And then of course the rest of the special teams, the coverage, the blocking, the just everything else has been poor and to bad. And it's like I wrote in our roundtable today. It's like the series of I'm going way back, Wilson, to the series of airport movies, the disaster movies. What's something's gonna bad happen. Every game, every movie. What is it gonna be this time? And that's what I feel like watching these special teams. The receiving core, it's been a symbiotically, I hate to say negative, but problematic relationship with Jayden Daniels and the receivers. Daniels at times, does not get the ball to them where they need to be or throw good passes, and you got to throw more downfield. But they haven't caught the ball, and they haven't gotten open as well as they should. And they pretty much need to improve their. There've been some bright spots. Malik Neighbors has been good. Kayshon Boutte finally got his first touchdown. We talked to Jeray Jenkins yesterday, and he told him, this is going to be the breakout for you. This is going to lead to some big things. And it might lead to a much better second half of the season than a first half for Kayshon, but that hasn't been good. The running backs, like I said, they don't have any great running backs, so they're doing the best they can with what they have, and they're not getting a lot of holes. So it's a team with a lot of issues. We knew this going into the season. Again, a lot of question marks to answer, and some of them just don't have adequate answers. And I think we're seeing that as we're now midway through the season. The secondary at times has been good. They give up a lot of chunk plays, more than I would have thought. But I think you're going back to this guys with experience and some ability, but they don't have a lot of time playing together. Now you have half a season, but it's still something that's growing. And like they added Joe, I always say his name wrong. Joe Fouché, and it seemed like it upset the chemistry, when they put him in, and they had to move things around a little bit against Auburn. So we'll see how that goes this week, because you're playing a team in Florida that's also hot and cold. Anthony Richardson had a fantastic game against Tennessee. He threw for over 400 yards in that game, but he threw for like 80 yards against Missouri this past week, and ran for a few more. He didn't have a great day. 66 yards against Missouri. So not a great day. Just over 100 yards total offense. So it's it cuts both ways, and I think it's kind of a flip the coin situation this weekend to see who comes out better. Who has the better day is probably going to win.
Yeah, I want to get back into Jayden Daniels and Anthony Richardson comparison in a minute here. But first, just another point about special teams. LSU, we've had a couple players meetings now. Usually that means that something is going wrong. Last week it was, the passing game with the wide receivers and the quarterback. This week, team-wide, saying that the game against Tennessee was unacceptable. Garrett Nussmeier got up and spoke during that meeting. So did some of the other veteran team leaders, all sort of coming together. But the first topic of discussion was special teams. LSU ranks 106th in the country in ESPN's SP Plus metric. That's a metric that really measures efficiency. It's kind of a way to look at, holistically. It's how like you said, something new every week with this special teams unit. Our colleague Sheldon Mickles is writing about that very thing today. And I think he's going to kind of lay out every little thing that's kind of gone wrong. And the list is long. And that's what's been so
longer
bizarre.
Than I thought, even.
Yeah, that's what's so bizarre about it. It's not just like, okay, they're missing kicks consistently, which is usually what you see in special teams. It's like all these other things that are contributing to it. And obviously, Brian Kelly and special teams coordinator Brian Polian know that they've got to get that stuff cleaned up. Because, like you said, I think we've been talking about, like, that stuff's just coaching. That doesn't really matter if you're in year one. That stuff shouldn't really be happening, especially 6 games into the season. You could almost write it off to a degree 1 or 2 games in. But now, half a season in, that stuff's still happening. It's just kind of bizarre, and that's just sort of something that's like where you think about short-term where LSU is right now, that stuff's got to get cleaned up. But, like you kind of brought up the Jayden Daniels and Anthony Richardson thing. I know you're writing about Jayden Daniels today, but let's kind of just touch on him a little bit here. Obviously, there's sort of a ton of discussion around the quarterback because there always is. That's just what you're going to get when you play quarterback. That comes with the position. But Jayden has been Brian Kelly, last week, the whole topic was, okay, be more aggressive, push the ball downfield. And to a degree, he did that. Brian Kelly even said today, you asked him about it. He said that, they made a step in the right direction. He was a little bit, I think, not like effusive in that comment, but said that, let's continue to see some improvement. But I thought so too, watching that he made some throws into tighter windows. There's a lot that's going on with this offense. I don't think it's all on Jayden Daniels, but if you could just sum up for me your thoughts on how he's played halfway through the year and kind of what you want to see in the back half of the season.
Yeah, he's not a terrible quarterback. He's not an elite quarterback. He's got some ability. He's the fastest. Let's say a positive. Start with positive. In 30 years of covering LSU football, he is the fastest quarterback I've ever seen at LSU. Definitely. So he's got the mobility, and although earlier in the season it seemed like that was kind of cutting both ways because he would take off too soon instead of going through his progressions. He's gotten better at that. He's gotten better at looking for different receivers, but there are times when he's like, we can see, and of course it's easy to see from the press box sometimes compared to being on the field with these 6'7", people come in trying to take your head off, but he misses some receivers sometimes who are open. And then sometimes the passes will be off a little bit. He did take more chances and was pretty effective, I thought, against Tennessee. Now, a lot of them were kind of empty yards. He threw for more yards than Hendon Hooker, but it was, you're trying to play catch up the whole time, and it's not what you want. You want more of a balanced attack. I mean, you see why they picked him, given the state of the offensive line that we've seen. I don't think you could have predicted all the injuries and such for the offensive line, but I think, I was thinking today, if Miles Brennan had stayed and he'd been the starting quarterback, would they be better? Would they be better than 4-2? Would the offense be better? And in some ways they would be in terms of the passing game, but the escapability that has been necessary for Daniels to display a lot of times in these first 6 games, Miles wouldn't have given you that. So I think on balance, he's the best guy to go with. It's, as I said in our roundtable today, it's interesting to me to say, he's got another year, right? Will we be talking about him as the starter midway through 2023, or will they, go to Walker Howard, or will they bring in another transfer? Because LSU, to eventually get where they want to be, they're going to have to be perfectly blunt, they're going to have a better quarterback than Jayden Daniels. And is he a stopgap, or is he the guy for now and for next year until they get to, recruiting some more of those guys? I don't know anyone knows the answer to that question, but it's certainly a position where you can change your fortunes rather quickly in college football these days with the transfer portal. It's always been kind of volatile with quarterbacks, but even more so now. So I think it's very interesting going forward. But for now, this week, and it seems like the remainder of the season, he's the guy they're going to stick with. I saw someone say once they get the last 3 games of the season, they should play Walker Howard. I don't think they're going to make that decision. I think Walker's probably going to redshirt, and that's going to be it. But there are a lot of interesting questions going forward. But for right now, he's the guy. He's improving. He could improve more, but he's been about what I expected to see out of him overall.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And also, if they were to play a quarterback the last 3 games of the year, it would be Garrett Nussmeier. I don't think it would be Walker Howard because he's a true freshman who was expected to redshirt. And while Walker, they think that the world of him and think that he's getting better every day and that they've really got something in him moving forward. But yeah, he's not going to really be in that quarterback conversation in terms of who's starting until next year. And even then, I don't foresee any sort of switch to Garrett. At this point of the year, it's like if Garrett had beaten out Jayden, then we'd probably be seeing him. Maybe if it really goes off the rails, then maybe. But they like what Jayden does with their legs, and at this point, they think gives them the best chance to win. And it kind of comes down to that. And as we sort of shift into that, focusing instead of the big picture 30,000-foot view, sort of kind of into the here and now. What do you expect to see, I guess, overall, though, from this team second half of the year, starting with Florida this weekend? You're 4-2, like we said, 2-1 in the SEC. It's not a bad place to be in, but it's kind of the way that they've gotten there that's maybe a little bit concerning because it's been so messy at times. But a quality win over Mississippi State that really looks better every week. Mississippi State has put up 40 on Arkansas, put up 40 on Texas A&M, and those are 2 teams that LSU has left in November. But what do you – I think basically they need to get more out of what they have in the second half of the year, clean up those special teams mistakes, just show improvement. I think that's really what LSU fans want to see. Just look better than you did the last 2 years. And in some ways they have, and in some ways they haven't. What do you expect to see out of this team, or maybe think that you should be seen out of this team over the next 6 games? In a general sense, the second half of the schedule is tougher than the first half. Starting with the Florida game, you have Ole Miss at home, then you take a week off, Alabama, go to Arkansas, who's struggled lately, of course, UAB, and then at Texas A&M, who has also struggled. It'd be very interesting to see where Texas A&M is mentally as a team by the time LSU gets there in November. They may have checked out because they've already got 4 or 5 losses at that point. But I think LSU could improve and maybe not improve the record. That they could improve in some of these areas and still be 3-3 the second half of the year, or 2-4 even. Like you got the goal, and it's a modest goal by the standards of LSU football over the last 20 years or so. But you try to get bowl eligible. You're 2 wins away from that. You think you're going to beat UAB. That means you got to win at least one more SEC game. Obviously, you want to win more than that. If they got to 4-4 in the SEC and beat UAB, and we're 7-5 overall, I think that would be progress. But how do they get there? The offense has to be more balanced. They have to have a stability on the offensive line. That's the biggest key. I think the defense is pretty much. I think we've pretty much seen where the defense will be. I think that they can be pretty good at times. Like you said, shutting down Mississippi State for most of the game was impressive. Holding Auburn down, if you got down 17-0, was impressive. But you've got to show more of a spark on offense, some creativity. A trick play, Wilson, would be nice. And I'm not talking anything too exotic. A reverse, or something like that. You've got guys, lots of talented guys who played quarterback. Somebody could throw a pass. I'd like to see something. We haven't seen
anything at all like that from LSU so far. And, a little more in the screen game with the wide receivers that needs to be better. And obviously more in the vertical passing game. Special teams has to improve. I just keep thinking this cannot continue. They're just not going to keep making these horrible mistakes. And in the very first play of the game, Besh, who's, a guy you would say, hey, put Besh back there, right? I mean, if you've asked a lot of us and a lot of fans, a lot of the media, a lot of fans, who would you put back there? Put Jack Besh, and he fumbles it out of bounds. So they've got first string guys playing special teams. That's what the maddening thing about it is for LSU. But that said, I think it can get better because special teams it's somewhat technique and it's somewhat instinctive, and the kicking part has been acceptable. So that's something to build on. But will they be 4-2 the second half of this year? That would be quite a feat. I think that would be like the best case scenario. 3-3 seems much more likely. 2-4 probably seems even more likely. But I think that's the floor for this team is going 2-4 the rest of the way. And this is a game that's one of those toss-ups that you look at. Arkansas kind of looks like a toss-up. Texas A&M looks like it might be a toss-up. Alabama, because we don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Young, and given how well LSU played there last year against them, had a great chance to win, throwing the ball in the end zone at the end of the game. I don't think that's out of bounds either. So I think every game is winnable for LSU, but I can't see them winning them all or losing them all at this point.
No, the way they've been so inconsistent that and just volatile. I mean, that's what you knew this year would be, but it also means that like you said, to go to win them all, that no way. 3-3. I think finishing 3-3 would be really respectable. Frankly, I mean, and if they were to end up going 4-2 and finish 8-4, that'd be great in year one. You really hit the over on the Vegas win total of 6.5 coming into the season, and then have a chance to maybe even get to 9 in the bowl game. That'd be fantastic. But the win-loss record, frankly, I don't think means as much. And when you think about the long-term view of this program this season, while it'd be great to have that kind of confidence going into the offseason and give the fan base some juice to get behind Brian Kelly and everything that they're doing going into year two, I just want to see, I think, the product on the field just look better. Even if LSU doesn't win some of these games, Ole Miss, that's a good team. Alabama is obviously, number 1 to 3 in the country. I mean, they're going to be in the fight for the playoff. They're Alabama. Arkansas and Texas A&M, those are winnable games, but on the road. But just regardless of necessarily the outcome of those games, whether or not LSU wins or loses them, just play better, play cleaner football, show improvement in the second half of the year. A mark of Brian Kelly's teams in the past have been playing well in November. They've really been impressed LSU with their conditioning this year. He's chalked that up to some of those wins against Mississippi State and Auburn. So let's see how that conditioning show up in November, because sometimes teams completely fall off because they haven't been conditioned well in the offseason. If you're going to look for some things to maybe be confident about and happy about, and hold on to some hope that LSU will get back into championship contention in the next 2 to 3 years, let's see how they play. Just even if the win-loss record isn't there, clean up these special teams issues. Show as a coaching staff that you have an issue and you're able to get it fixed, and then begin to bring the best out of your talent and not just have to, even though it's going to take some time to get the personnel in there and get the roster where you want it, be able to show that creativity, like you said, a trick play or just something to get the wide receivers, really bring the best out of a group that is the most talented on the team and hasn't been taken advantage of to the full extent this season. I think that would be something that you could at least say, all right, they're moving in the right direction. They've shown some improvement here in year one, even if the win-loss record doesn't necessarily reflect that. As we go to this Florida game, do you have another point?
Yeah. The passing game is the area with the most room for growth and the most room for improvement, obviously. So on Jayden Daniels' part and the receiving course part, yes. Yeah.
If anybody has any other questions, be sure to send them our way. As we kind of look just directly at this Florida matchup, though, obviously that's the next thing on the schedule this weekend in the Swamp, 6 p.m. Or Central Time, 7 p.m. local time on ESPN. Interesting matchup in that it is 2 first-year coaches. Billy Napier, obviously spent the last few years over in Lafayette. LSU didn't really consider him in their coaching search, and Florida hired him. And so it's kind of an interesting time, the first time that these teams are playing when you have that dynamic going on. Both looking for rebuilds. The big news today, Will Campbell, left tackle. He is expected to play in this game. He has returned to practice. It's great news just Before anything else, great for Will. It sounded like a really scary situation. What happened on Friday? Ambulance had to come onto the field, take him to the hospital. He was in the hospital over the weekend. He finally was released Monday after passing all of his tests. I mean, Josh Williams described the situation as traumatic on Friday. And so for Will to be okay, that's great, more than anything else. But for LSU, it's huge to get your left tackle back. How much do you think that actually ends up influencing this game?
Well, for a couple of reasons, and going back to it, I would say that couldn't have helped LSU's mindset going into the Tennessee game. I'm not saying that's why they lost, because Will Campbell didn't play, and there was this traumatic situation when they had to cart him off the field in an ambulance from the team walkthrough, but it didn't help. It was kind of like when they had the injury to I'm blanking on the name, of course, Wilson, at the first play of the Auburn game, on the first kickoff, Seven Banks, and that seemed to affect LSU for a while in the game, and I think contributed to the fact that they fell down 17-0. So it's not everything, but it's not nothing either. So this is a huge boost. I would not have hearing Brian Kelly say Monday, oh, he's just going to be getting out of the hospital. I'm like, hospital on Monday to playing on Saturday. I don't see it, but apparently that's going to be the case. So that's a huge boost. Obviously, he's played very well, a very highly recruited player from Northeast Louisiana, who they've trusted at left tackle. Doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes, or freshman has some growth, but just like I said, cornerstone to build with him and Emory Jones at the two tackle spots, and you can have them for 2 more years and maybe 3. It means a lot, and I think it's going to be a huge boost for the team psychologically to get him back and to help pass blocking and run blocking, which are obviously the things that offensive tackles do. But I think it's a big boost, and hopefully for LSU's sake, there's no more last second curveball injury problem kind of thing, because they don't need, this team has enough issues. They don't need any more issues going into this game. It's the Swamp is supposedly sold out. I've been to the Swamp a lot of times when it's sold out and the fans are right on top of you. The stands are very close on the sidelines. I know, being a Georgia guy, you're used to seeing Florida play in Jacksonville, but in the Swamp, it's a little tougher atmosphere than a 50-50 stadium, for both teams. And I've seen the Swamp when it's not that many people. When LSU went there 2 years ago, of course, it was COVID. We were like 25% capacity. I think the attendance was like 16,000. And then you had the fog. And, of course, that game had its own memorable qualities to it. But it's going to be more of the Swamp, I think, that we're used to. But Florida's very much in the same boat, and I think you could take the crowd out of this game if you could get off to a decent start and be the team this time that, hey, maybe that would be a good idea for LSU. Let's try to be the team that takes the lead against a Power 5 opponent. That might be something they want to try and find that works for them.
They have not held a lead against a Power 5 opponent in the first half since going up 3-0 on Florida State in the opener. They've been outscored 60-31 in the first half of Power 5.
That's remarkable.
Astonishing, frankly.
It's kind of remarkable. But this is a series where history doesn't mean that much. It's interesting to me. Florida owned the series for a long time with Spurrier. Was the coach, but now it's tilted back towards LSU. LSU's won 3 in a row and 9 in the last 12. And the last 5 times, going back to 2004, I told you about this the other day, the last 5 times LSU lost the week or the game before playing Florida, they beat Florida. Some of the games were in Baton Rouge, some of the games were in Gainesville. And doesn't necessarily mean anything about this game, just like the comparative score thing. LSU lost by 27 to Tennessee. Tennessee beat Florida by 5. That doesn't necessarily mean anything either. But it is interesting that this has been a bounce-back spot for LSU in a lot of seasons and a lot of various kind of scenarios. And this reminds me a little of the Troy game, the situation in 2017 when LSU, it was lost a close game, but it still was a loss to Troy that was very embarrassing for LSU because no one expected it. And this is embarrassing in a different way, but they went to Florida the next week and they won 17-16. I think the Gators missed an extra point. That turned out to be the margin in the game. And I think this kind of reminds me of that. This a bounce back spot for LSU, and they're looking at it would be a good win. It wouldn't be beating Tim Tebow, Florida, or anything like that, but it would be a good win for LSU if they could get it. Absolutely,
especially to go on the road, break up, avoid any kind of sort of losing, streak here in the middle of the season. Get back on the winning side of things. It's going to be important for LSU to be able to stop the run in this game. Brian Kelly identified the strengths of Florida's team as the offensive line and the running game. They've got some dynamic running backs. They are 3rd in the country in yards per rush at 6.38 yards per carry. So they're running the football really well. We just saw LSU get burned on the ground against Tennessee. So they're going to have to come back. That defensive line, those linebackers, everybody, they're going to have to be able to come up and stop the run, especially when you have a dynamic running quarterback like Anthony Richardson. Though he has struggled as a passer, and he's been very consistent, like you mentioned earlier. They're going to have to be able to stop the run in this game and contain him. Maybe a big Harold Perkins game after not playing very much against Tennessee. We'll see how it all shakes out. Look for all of our coverage on theadvocate.com and NOLA.com. Subscribe to the newsletter, which is in your inbox. Rabalais handles a good bit of that.
Doing it tonight. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Be up late. Come on over if you want to.
Exactly. Subscribe to that. And join us here every Wednesday afternoon for some talk about LSU football. This has been The Advocate's LSU Sports Update. For Scott Rabalais and everybody else over at The Advocate, I'm Wilson Alexander. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.